fact that her name came up?
Well, look, to me, it's always helpful when you identify government corruption that you identify the actors. And Russiagate, as we all know, was a politically funded operation into our intelligence and law enforcement communities to go to a secret court and lie about a political opponent to illegally surveil him. I mean, that took us 2 years to unpack, right? It was a big deal. But then you got to ask, wait a second, how did that happen? And who are the players behind it? And I've always said Gina Haspel is one of the leading Russiagate architects who's remained behind the scenes. She would go on to become Trump's director of the Central Intelligence Agency. But if you rewind the clock back, and this is something I've told Schellenberg and Taibbi about and many others, in 2016, when Russiagate was launched in England, Gina Haspel was the CIA station chief for England, the #1 intel officer in the United Kingdom. And the reason that's important is because for intelligence operations to be lawfully conducted overseas in any country, England or otherwise, what we call the #1 Office of Director of National Intelligence rep, the DNI rep, Gina in England, has to authorize those offensive operations for intel and law enforcement. And we now know, and we know some more details due to the new reporting, that not only were US FBI and IC officials involved in bumping operations in England, but possibly other intel allies overseas. And none of that could have happened without Gina Haspel's authorization. So she's the one that helped launch Russiagate, and nobody's questioned her as to why and what the legality of that was and the extent of which she knew. And also, more importantly, the internal memorandums that she would have had to have written to authorize that conduct. Who'd she work with? Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, others, England, America? And why would she, the CIA representative in the United Kingdom, interfere in a presidential election cycle? That's something that they're not supposed to do, period. And I would think Americans would want to know that. So, and remember, and we'll get to the other reason why Gina is so important, about the ICA report that Devin Nunes and our team did on John Brennan's ICA. Gina Haspel was the one that blocked its release, critical release in the Trump administration, through to the end. She's the one that stonewalled it. She's the reason it's still in a safe in the CIA. I know we'll talk about that. It was a big piece of the new reporting, but that's why she's a central figure.
And how does someone like Gina Haspel then end up as a CIA director under Trump? When,
I think
obviously people knew that she was involved in this.
Well, some people just didn't want to believe it, and others just said it's not important, because back then people thought if you're talking Russiagate, you're talking right-wing conspiracy neocon theories. But in reality, you're talking the biggest corruption scandal to plague the U.S. intelligence community and law enforcement community against a weaponized target of politics in U.S. history. And so also, the fact remains that, the establishment class is always going to put forward establishment figures. And you can't fault Donald Trump in 2016 for having no idea how DC operates, because he's new to the political game, came in and said, oh, I should be able to trust people in government. If they say that person's good and that person's great, they should, especially when it comes to national security, kind of just be like this, a little bit here and there, but pretty much down the middle. And so, to me, it shows the success of her corruption, unfortunately, in the Washington, D.C. swamp, that she was able to stretch that tenure out to the top levels of government and be one of the main architects of the corruption we're talking about, that Taibbi and you and Schellenberger and so many others have been reporting on for, I guess, now it's 6 years.
Yeah, it's really amazing, because you released the Nunes report, which you were the author of, I assume. You released that in 2018. My gosh, it's up to going on 6 years now since that was released. It seems like it wasn't that long ago, but here we are 6 years later, and we still don't have all of the facts surrounding this case.
We still don't have all the documents, and it's public that while we did the Nunes report and the Russiagate report, the 330-page report, and we put out the 65 some depositions we took of all the people involved in Russiagate, that took us 2 years just to get out. The second big piece of information that people are finally focusing on is, remember, in 2016 and 17, John Brennan, in a matter of weeks, was ordered by Obama to issue his ICA, his Intelligence Community Assessment. Shorthand, what did Russia do, if anything, to interfere in the U.S. elections? As if you could surmise that answer in 3 weeks, but they gave it a go. And they produced this report, which was largely false. And what we did on the Russiagate team, I'm talking Devin Nunes, me, and a couple other staffers, is think the Nunes memo, what that did to the FBI and DOJ and the FISA reporting and all that, how we deconstructed the corruption there. Well, simultaneously, we put subject matter experts against John Brennan's ICA, and we created a classified report akin to the Nunes memo on just the ICA, meaning what went into it, who did the interviews, what was the intelligence, was it relied on falsely, and was there political motivation? We answer all these questions in a 17-page report. Now, we tried to get that report out after we did the Russiagate investigation, and then we tried to get it out during the Trump administration, when Johnny Ratcliffe was DNI and I was the deputy and all that stuff. And the single most important figure in blocking the release of that report on the ICA is Gina Haspel, and it never got out. So I'm glad that there's new light on that specific reporting. We have to clarify some of the things that has been written about it, but I've always wanted its release because it speaks volumes to what's now in the mainstream media about, wait a second, how much was the IC involved? And was there more corruption than we know about? And the answer is they were involved, and yes, there was tons more corruption. The problem is I can't tell you about it still because this report is still classified, sitting in a safe at CIA headquarters, because the deep state and the establishment class doesn't want you to know that they basically did what the FBI and IC did in FISA land. They did it for Brennan's ICA.
So you requested that report should have been released, right? You requested that, but Trump didn't demand it. There was no, so that's how they're getting away with this. The fact that it's still not released, because what else could you have done to get this released?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were up against. You know, I believe the president wanted it declassified. And unfortunately, people like Gina Haspel worked with people like Pat Cipollone and others at deep staters at DOJ to say, you know, the same thing they always say, oh my God, national security, people are going to die. Blah. Actually, what it always is you're covering up your own corruption. And unfortunately, we lost that fight because we just ran out of time. If we had a little more time, maybe a few more months, I think that would have come out. But Joe Biden winning was, you know, their victory, not just in the political landscape, but to bury this. So look, I think if President Trump wins, this should be declassified along with a whole host of other material. I think the American public and reporters actually should champion the release of this. You know, that clown at Washington Post, David Ignatius, actually wrote an article congratulating Gina Haspel, remind you, a journalist, congratulating Gina Haspel on blocking the release of government documents. That's what a journalist wrote. Wow. That should tell you everything you need to know about what's in this report, because I believe people leaked it to him and he saw the political bend to that reporting and he said, wait a second, we can't have this.